Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a system you might not know much about, but one that shapes every single day for people inside Maine's jails. It all comes down to one critical process: inmate classification. You see, a bureaucratic sounding process called inmate classification has some pretty profound real world consequences. It's not just about safety, it's about access to opportunities, and it really defines the nature of daily life for anyone who's incarcerated. So, what is this process really? Let's dive in and break down what inmate classification actually means. At its heart, classification is basically a sorting process. But here's the key part: it is supposed to be based entirely on objective information. This isn't just about the crime someone's accused of, it's meant to be a fact based look at their risk, their needs, and their behavior. And the stakes here are incredibly high. An inmate's classification level pretty much dictates everything about their life inside. We're talking about where they're housed, if they can get into certain programs, whether they have work opportunities, who they can see during visitation, even how freely they can move around. It's the whole shebang. So yeah, with so much on the line, you can see why getting this classification decision right is absolutely critical. And that's not just for the inmates, it's for the staff and everyone else inside that facility. Ultimately, the goal is to create an environment that's safe and secure for everybody. It's this constant balancing act, you know? You have to manage the risk an inmate might pose while also ensuring their own safety, all while trying to make sure the treatment is fair and consistent across the board. And this shows us it's not some simple black and white choice. It's a really complex decision with a whole range of possible outcomes. If you get a mismatch, say you put a high-risk person in the general population or a low-risk person in a high-security unit, well, that can create serious problems for everyone involved. So, how does Maine make sure this whole process stays consistent and fair? Well, let's take a look at the official playbook, the specific rules that all county and municipal jails have to follow. This timeline is really important. The process starts fast, right? An initial call is made within just 72 hours. But what's so crucial here is that it's not set in stone. The whole system is built for reevaluation. These mandatory reviews mean the classification can change based on new info or an inmate's behavior. And this is not a one-way street. Inmates actually have clearly defined rights in this process. They have to be told in writing what their classification is. They get a chance to respond to it, and they can formally appeal the decision. The whole system is designed to be transparent and reviewable, not just some arbitrary call. And underneath all of these procedures is probably one of the most important pillars of the entire system, the principle of non-discrimination. Maine's standards draw a very clear line in the sand on this. Decisions absolutely cannot be based on things like someone's race, religion, or gender. Instead, they must be rooted in those objective factors we talked about, things like safety needs, security risks, and medical issues. And digging a little deeper, Maine standards include a really significant modern consideration. Jails are actually required to acknowledge an inmate's consistently held gender identity when they're making housing decisions. Of course, they have to balance that respect with any specific security concerns, but it shows the system has to adapt to both legal and human rights standards. Okay, so we've looked at the definitions and the rules. But what does all of this actually mean in the real world? Let's talk about the impact this has on people and their communities. I mean, the contrast is stark. A lower risk classification can literally open doors to programs and work that might actually help with rehabilitation. On the flip side, a higher risk classification means a much more restrictive, heavily supervised life. And for families, this stuff directly impacts things like visitation and staying in contact. All right, so let's just recap the big ideas here. Classification is basically the engine that runs daily life in jail. In Maine, it's a process that's bound by some really strict rules. It has to be objective, it needs regular reviews, and it's built on these strong anti-discrimination principles, including some important protections for gender identity. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We've seen the playbook, right? The standards and the principles are all laid out on paper. But the real question is, how do these rules actually translate into reality for every single person inside the system? What does fairness truly look like, day in and day out?